Alright, so we're back with another Hobby Basics 101 tutorial. This time we're going to look at contrast. So it's a different type of paint that creates a different effect and a supposedly faster way of painting your models. So let's jump down and I'll show you what I think is possibly the best way to use this medium. Let's head down there now and we'll get started. So here we are, we're down at the painting table and we're going to look at that third and final method of contrast. So I've got my model here. It's a Delac Ganger from Necromunda. Fantastic miniature, really good for showing this sort of stuff off. Now I'm not going to apply the contrast straight over Wraithbone or Grey Seer. I don't think it provides the best results. I think you're better off doing what's collectively called a slap chop. So what we've got two colours here. I've got them out on the palette already. We have our Mechanicus Standard Grey, and I've grabbed some white Scar. And we're actually going to dry brush this on the model to give it some contrast before we even start. Just a grayscale contrast. So we'll grab our Mechanicus Standard Grey on our brush. We're going to take some of that off on our paper towel just like that. And then we're going to bring our brush over and just start flicking across all the model. We don't want to necessarily fill the whole thing in. We want to leave those deepest points as our normal dry brush, but we also want to pick up all those higher surfaces. So just go around your model now, something like that, just to really provide a good base for this. If you don't feel like it's strong enough and you want to go a little bit more, you can give this a second pass. It's not going to hurt. It's better to build this up in a few thin, fast pass layers rather than trying to get it all perfect in one coat. So I want to focus more of my dry brushing around the facial features, around this higher raised areas of the model. Try and pick out just those little details in there. Come up and pick out these details here. You want to make sure you get the weapons. But you really want to use this just as a sort of all over highlight, and then to really hit those top surfaces of the model like what I'm doing here, because it's those top surfaces is where the light will catch. A couple of bits in there that I feel need a bit more, and that's virtually it. We've essentially just prepared our whole model for this method in next to no time at all. So with that now done, I haven't even washed out my brush. I've just gone straight into my white Scar. And what we're going to do here, we want it to be a light dry brush, but we want to work from the top. We want to keep this, if I've got my model like this, I want to be working on this sort of angle here and working down the model and just picking up those areas that would catch the most light. Like around the edges there, top corners, top edges of the surfaces. That butt plate of that rifle's a good spot. We just want this to be, we want it to be there, but we want it to be light. And then just as you start running out of the paint on your brush, you can just start working down and just catching the very tops of some of these lower details here. We don't really want to go reloading the brush for this. We just want to sort of use the paint that's on there and work from our directions to create our foundation for this. So like there, where it's a very high sort of rib on the tunic jacket, you can just give that a light dusting. We've got a bit of a couple of spots there. You just want to pick out some of the very highest points here with this, especially now that it's, like I said, fairly dry. And there you go, that's it. We've now got our model pretty much ready to go on with our contrast. So I'll just pick out a few little areas here. I just want to really give a bit of power to where the light would be hitting. And there you have it. As you can see, I've gone very light towards the bottom and very strong towards the top, almost imitating the light as it hits the model. So I've got my contrast here, which is Corandrus green. I've put it in my wash palette. So I've just put about 4 brush loads of contrast paint. And I've just brought over a brush load of water as well, just to help it flow a bit better. Now this is very important here, because we can't just lather it all over like a base coat and expect it to come out the way we want it. We actually have to go around these details here, much like we're painting a layer. So very carefully just come in and around these details that we want in a different colour, and work our contrast through, much like that. Now this stuff will tint the whole surface, but also at the same time act like a wash and build in the recesses. So we just have to keep an eye out for our pooling, much like when we washed our models. So just a nice even coat all the way around there. Then we can load up and bring some more across and just keep working our way around our model, just filling in all those details, going over all our nice dry brush foundation work there. Carefully come into that belt buckle. Start building down here and pulling that paint out of those recesses there, spreading it around. Like I said, we've just got to try and get this. It's not going to go even, but we just have to try and make it as even as we can. Just like that. Get in there. And just follow this all the way around the model. And so we'll come into these areas at the back here and just carefully work away around those armor plates that are there, because I want to do them in a different colour. Now this stuff will take a little while to dry, but as you can see where I started off already, it's tinted the model, it's given it a nice deep sort of tone to it, but it's also allowed the highlighted areas from our dry brush to protrude through it. It's a very thin paint. It's not like our normal paints at all. So let's just keep going on this now and get this model done, and I'll come back to you once I've finished all this green, and I'll show you sort of what the next steps are to get this one done. So as you can see, that's now done, and it's given us this really cool sort of toned green effect. It definitely has created some shadows, some very okay layering, and definitely has some wash there in the recess, all just with that one paint. But you have to be very careful, because these areas like in here where we didn't want to paint it those colours around the face mask, even the trim of the jacket, we've actually had to avoid touching those areas, and it can be a very time consuming process. This one, just to do that jacket, took me a good 10 to 15 minutes. So if you think it's easy, this is a great way to go. It's a great way to get battlefield ready models. But now what we can do is come in with a different brush. I'm going to come in with a slightly smaller brush, and we can start working our way out from the center of the model. So this is going to be areas like these ties and the edging of the jacket, around the belt buckle and the belt. Start working our way out from there. Look at some of these armor plating, and then we can end up finishing off with our face and our weapons and that sort of stuff. So what we'll do, we will grab, let's go with some Black Templar. Now this stuff you have to give a really good shake. Let's get some of our Black Templar out here. Take a brush load of water as well, just to sort of so that this contrast isn't quite as overpowering. And what we'll do, we'll start working around this banding here. So just come in and carefully just draw across it, same as you would if you were layering. Head up to the next one. Now I've got a very unique colour scheme for my Delac. So that banding, these armour plates will be the same. I'm going to hit them in with this as well, just like this. Don't be afraid to get it in those recesses. Just don't want to get it on the green that we've already now finished. We'll look at this banding around the edge of the coat as well. Just run a fine bead of that contrast up there. Don't worry too much about the belt buckles. We can come in and just give them a traditional coat of maybe a dark silver or something later on. But just run around. If it overlaps just a little bit, it doesn't matter. It's all sort of part of the effect, isn't it? It's all just the optical illusion. But as you can see, I can very quickly get a model up to a tabletop standard simply by using this contrast paint in this method. And then once it's done, like I said, we don't have to go back, we don't have to highlight it or any of that sort of stuff. We can just leave it here. So I'll go around now and just quickly hit in all this black. Take me about 5 minutes or so, and then we can come back and start looking at another area and see just how quickly this model can get painted. Alright, so I've grabbed some Gilliman flesh here, and we're just going to start looking at these fleshy areas. Now, I'm not expecting this to really do a lot. I've had a crack at this a couple of times, and like I said, I don't think it is sort of the best way. It's definitely not achieving the results that I desire for my models, but as a starting point for my Delac, it's actually achieving the green that I want. It's achieving that black that I want, but from this point on I think I'd just paint the rest as a traditional layer, base, highlight, wash, miniature. So I'm just hitting these in now. You can also play with your dry brushes too, and that will change the tones of your contrast. So you can maybe look at, you know, dry brushing your faces and that with Rakarth flesh and Flaybone flesh rather than going just black and grey. So you can sort of play around with it. You do have a little bit of flexibility there in your base coats, but I mean, for a flesh look, to me that's not sort of what I'm after on my miniatures. But we'll run with it for this example so that you can see how it all turns out. What we'll do, we'll grab some of the snakebite leather and take it to a new well there. We'll bring a little bit of that out. I only got a small area, so I'll only pull a little bit out. And what I'll do, I'll just hit this leather on the back here. So I've grabbed some Basilicanum Grey. I'm just going to put a coat of that over this little sort of air filter down here, just like that. Let that dry off, and we'll just finish this model up, or this session with this model, with some Blood Angels red on the casing of that pistol, just for a bit of a contrast and pop. Alright, so that's sort of our base of our model now complete. And look, like I said, the green looks fantastic. I'm really happy with that. But using this method, the other colours don't pop the way I want them to. So this might be something where, you know, you've got a big area like this sort of coat here, that you can use it on an area like that. It works very, very well for these organic fabric sort of shapes and textures. Not so much on these more flatter, fabricated, polished metals and hard surfaces and casings and armor and that sort of stuff. It's got its merits. It can very quickly get lots of detail done very quickly. But for an overall finish, I think that's well below what I personally would like to put on the tabletop. There are some ways that we could fix it from here, which is going to lead into our next videos. So what I'll do, I'll quickly belt in just a coat of on this metal, just so we've got something sort of semi-finished, and we can have a look at it at the end, and we'll jump up and just have a quick chat about this one. So as you can see, we've managed to make our contrast work for our green overcoat. We've managed to make it work for our black armor, but when it came to the skin, it's missing. It's not bright enough, and then the contrast you bring in makes it too dark at the same time. So I think this is something you can use to do a lot of your base coating, a lot of your first coating and that sort of stuff in one foul swoop, but I don't think it's a be all and end all for everything. There are other ways you can use it, however, which we'll get to some point in the future, which allow you to create different techniques and different effects. So there's a couple of things to remember here too. With your dry brushing, I've just gone Mechanicus standard grey and white. You can put another layer in there if you want. You can change the tones altogether and maybe go for more sandier tones, more of your bones and that sort of stuff. You possibly could even just go from a black through your Karak stones into your Wraith bones, which might give you a different effect again on your colours. It all comes down to trial and error and personal taste. But once you've got it, write it down so you don't forget how you've done it. So that concludes all three of our ways of very quickly and easily getting a battle ready army on the tabletop. We've built our model, we've done our base, we've done our undercoat, and then we've split off to our base coating washing, our dry brushing, and finally now our contrast method. Where to from here? So there's a few directions from here. We can go down the route of layering and highlighting. We can combine our base coat and our dry brush to very quickly and easily get highlights on. So what we'll do next week, we've already done dry brushing, so there's a quick snippet for you right there. We've covered a lesson straight away. You can dry brush your base coated models, you can dry brush your contrasted models to quickly and easily pick up a highlight. But I think next week what we'll look at some layering and highlighting, and I'll detail those steps just one by one as we normally do. For this week, pick the way you want to start your model and build your foundation with your painting, be it one of our three methods, our base coating and washing, our dry brushing, our contrast mediums. Start getting those done, and then we can move on to the next steps and really start lifting them from a battle ready standard to a display standard. That's all for this week, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.